Okay, so the first thing we're going to do for our drawing in 3 different styles is we're going to fold our paper into thirds. So what I like to do for this is I call it a burrito fold. I'm going to bring one side over past that halfway point, so where it looks like this fold right here and what I have left is about equal. Then I'm going to wrap that on top, and then I'm going to turn it this way. Okay. Let me get in my camera here. And then I'm just going to keep pushing that over as I start to crease my paper, right? So I can see kind of right in here as I'm starting to crease my paper, there's a little bit of a gap. So I'm going to push that piece of paper a little bit closer into that fold, into that corner. There we go. And then at the same time, I can squeeze this side and crease that there. And then just crease my entire paper. Here we go. If it's not perfect, that is okay. Don't worry about it. Don't fret about it. It's okay if it's a little off. Mine is definitely a little off here. You want to try and get it to just look neat and appear about equal. But if it is not, that is okay. We can always redo it too if they're really off. You do want them to be about equal, but if one is definitely larger than the other, you can always redo it, refold it. That's okay if there's multiple folds in here. So now once we have folded our paper, we are going to draw our image on here, whatever it is that you want to do. Again, we're going to do 3 different styles. So we're going to have one area that is objective abstraction, which means that we can tell what the artwork is, but it doesn't look realistic. Then we're going to have our realistic side where we're trying to go for as realistic as possible. And then we're going to have our non-objective side, which is where we have broken that image down so much we can no longer tell what it was supposed to be an image of. So I'm going to get my drawing on here and map it out across all 3 of my sections, and then I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so I'm going to do an airplane. I have it drawn. It crosses all 3 sections. And so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave my realistic section here in the middle plain right now. We are going to shade this one in with pencil. We just worked on shading with pencil, so you should be a little bit better at it when you come to do that this time around. This side is going to be my objective abstraction. So now I'm going to start to simplify this section of my airplane to abstract a little bit so it doesn't look realistic. And then I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so I worked on my objective abstract side, so I simplified the shapes of my airplane here. I mean, an airplane is pretty basic shapes and straight lines, but instead of making it look as much like a fin, I try to make it look more like a rhombus and more like a triangle, more like a triangle down here. Simplified the design at the end of my wingtips, right? So it's doesn't have that curve to it or certain angles. Just gonna do some straight lines. And then my clouds, I'm gonna add some clouds in the sky. I'm gonna make them swirly over here in my objective abstract so you can still see that they're clouds. I am gonna have a few clouds connect over here into my realistic side. So that way they change over and they overlap. And then this becomes more of my realism that's gonna be shaded. Next, what I'm going to work on is my non-objective abstract side. So this just turns into kind of messier. It really breaks apart, and I can no longer kind of tell that it's an airplane. Okay, so now I have drawn out my non-objective abstraction side. So I still took things from my previous 2 sections. Like I still did some swirls like I did in the clouds over here. I still have kind of the shape that I have on the windows. I still included some ovals that kind of represent like the front half of the airplane. So there's still some representation, but having taken those shapes out from my previous 2 sections, that helps create a sense of unity from here into here. So it looks like it goes within, like I didn't just do something random over here. I still want it to, have a sense of unity as a picture as a whole. So take some things from your previous 2 sections to help guide you in this. But when you look at this on your own, you wouldn't get the idea of it being an airplane. So that's the goal here. Okay, so I've gotten done with 2 of my panels so far. I got done with the very left, which is our objective abstract, and it's colored with colored pencil. It's a monochromatic color scheme. So monochromatic means lights and darks of one color. The color I chose was blue-green, so I used a lighter blue-green color pencil I have, and then a darker blue-green color pencil that I have. They're both in the color blue-green. One's just darker, one's lighter, so I used both of those. And then I used a white, a silver, and a black. So you can always use gray, you could use gold, those are neutrals, you can use those with any color scheme. So use those here to color this in. And then my center, that's our realistic side, we're going with just pencil. Okay, we just practiced shading, so you guys should be a little better at that now. I did do a different type of shading. You can see in here I did some hatching and cross hatching on the airplane. So the sky is blended, the clouds are kind of blended. I actually kind of just used an eraser to do some negative space to pick up those clouds. But I did some hatching and cross hatching in here. So what that means is just little short lines close together. They can go in one direction, like I followed the contours, the shape of the airplane, right? They can also cross over and go that opposite direction just to give some different value and different lighting. The more lines you have, the darker that area appears to be. The less lines you have, the lighter that area appears to be. Okay, so that's our realistic section, just a pencil. That's called chromatic. And then our last section is going to be analogous, which are 3 to 4 colors beside each other on your color wheel. So it could be any 3 to 4 colors that are beside each other. I do want you to pick out one of your colors that you use on here should be the color you used over here. That's going to help give our piece unity. So I used blue-green over there, so I'm using blue-green. And then I'm using a blue, a green, there's my light green and a dark green, and then a yellow. So the only kind of one I skip over is a yellow-green. This could kind of count as a yellow-green to where these are all next to each other on the color wheel. I know with markers, it's a little harder to have those tertiary colors such as yellow-green or blue-green. So we can skip those. It could go blue, green, yellow, orange. Those would be 4 colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. You could also make that shorter and just do like blue, green, and yellow. Those are 3 colors next to each other on the color wheel. That would count too. Again, I know our tertiaries are just harder to come by in markers, but if you have them, include them. That's just going to make your piece look better to not skip over those if you have those available to you. So here's the colors I'm going to use for my last section. Now we haven't done marker yet in class. So when we do marker, what I want you to do is kind of use your eraser first and go over your pencil marks to erase them a little bit, make them lighter, right? Because yellow, like a yellow marker, if you're using that, it's a very light color. Those pencil marks are going to show through. So I did this with the color pencil area as well. I erased these lines to make them lighter before I started doing my color pencil so it wouldn't blend in and kind of muddy up my colors. And so it's not totally erased, it's just lighter, which is what I want. So that's going to keep my markers looking a little cleaner. Okay. And then for this, I'm going to have to be real careful because I have some really skinny and small areas here. But I'm going to do yellow for these little swirly lines. And since this is a small space, I can really just kind of follow that curve that I had without picking up my marker too many times. So the more times you go over an area with marker, the darker that area is going to get. So I want you to intentionally go over a spot only if you want that area to actually get darker, right? You want to try to just get your marker lines side by side. Let me find a scrap paper here I'll show you on. So here's a scrap paper that I'll demonstrate for you. When we do marker, we don't want to color like this. This one, I did not test it out. I'll need to get a new one. I also would prefer you not use markers that are about dried out. So I'm going to get a different one of those. And we're not just like coloring around and back and forth. So I want you to kind of outline the space that you're going to color in first. If it's a really large space, you could break it down and make it smaller. So like if I wanted to, I could cut my circle into half into 2 sections. And I want you to color in one direction, just doing lines. and just try to line your lines up side by side. They might overlap a little bit, that's okay. Try not to if you can. This does make you go slower, but it looks much neater. So I have these little tiny gaps I can come in here and kind of put in a little dot to fill those gaps in. And then I'm going to move on to my second half. You always outline your area first, and then again, if it's a large area, break it down into some smaller sections. You could also create a nice, interesting texture doing this, because with marker coloring this way, I can see the direction that you're coloring in. So you could, if you're wanting to like break it down into sections, you could create an interesting texture here, right? By intentionally changing up the direction of which you are coloring on purpose. Sometimes people change the direction that they're coloring with marker without paying attention to how that looks overall. And then it creates this texture that you weren't really wanting, and it doesn't look smooth or coherent. This marker is also drying out. Good thing I tested these first so I can grab different ones. You can also find this under the announcements section. I have videos on craftsmanship. There's an announcement on craftsmanship and then 3 videos within that announcement. So you could just watch the one on how to color with marker as well. You could also go over the color pencil one. So now you can kind of see that my directions all point inwards in my circle. So that gives it an interesting texture. Now if I wanted to darken an area up intentionally, I could go over it a second time, and if I wanted to, I could even change the direction of which I'm going over that area. That's going to add in a shadow, right? We have just been doing shading on our last project. In the middle panel we have some shading, so that's going to add in a shadow for the marker. So that's how you create those, and I could even go over it again and darken it a little bit more to create different values within a color. Okay, so I said I'd have to be super careful. This is one of those areas I'm talking about. My oval here kind of goes behind my yellow, and my green, lighter green squares, my yellow swirls. So I have to be super careful on that outlining to not cross over and accidentally color in an area I wasn't wanting to color in. Since my outlines kind of go up and down, I'm going to also color in that same vertical direction so it blends into my outlines a little better. Okay, so I'm going to continue working on my marker side, and then I'll show you what that looks like when it's done. I have some really tiny areas in here to do as well, so if you have some of those fine point markers, you might want to use those too, or just think about the markers that you have and what's available to you as far as your drawing. So I've finished my version, my example piece of our project. We have our objective abstraction with a monochromatic color scheme, our realism with pencil, and then our non-objective abstract with an analogous color scheme. Color pencil, pencil, marker. I've gone over the craftsmanship for those, and now you may start yours on your own.